Is it just me, or do games feel greedier now? And no, I'm not talking about the $90 games for the Nintendo Switch 2, or the probably over $100 GTA 6, or the push to pre-order games that are often in a state that shouldn't have been shipped in the first place. No, none of that. What I'm actually here to talk about are the constant reminders to purchase in-game bundles while they're on sale, the paying money for a chance to get what you want, and the ever-presence of battle passes in every single online game. It's not just becoming an issue, but it has been a major issue for years now. And you may be thinking that, hey, these problems are only present in online games. And you'd largely be right. However, I don't know if this is just me, but it seems like online games have become much more common and popular in recent years. And I want you to know that this is not a coincidence. Before we get into that, we need to figure out why these in-game purchases have become so commonplace, because that wasn't always the case. The earliest example I could find kinda stretches the definition a little bit, but I think it counts. It occurred in a game I bet you've never heard of, let alone played. It's called Double Dragon 3: The Rosetta Stone. This 1990 side-scrolling beat-em-up arcade game had a very controversial game mechanic. Some stages would open with an in-game item shop where power-ups could be bought by inserting real coins into the arcade cabinet. That's crazy to me. That not only made this one of the first examples of microtransactions in gaming, but also one of the first examples of a pay-to-win game. They did backtrack on this decision 6 months later for the Japanese release, which removed this mechanic entirely. Fortunately, this quick retraction did seem to halt the spread of microtransactions for nearly a decade. But then we get to 1999, where it's now South Korea's turn to experience microtransactions with Quiz Quiz. It was an MMO quiz game where players could enter chat rooms and join whatever trivia or puzzle games interested them. Definitely doesn't feel like it'd fall under the modern definition of an MMO, but I guess it was massively multiplayer and online, so I'll give it to him. I couldn't find exactly what these microtransactions were used for, but it looks like the game had cosmetic items you could purchase with in-game currency, so at least it probably didn't affect gameplay. This game was also free to play, meaning that it was entirely monetized by these microtransactions. Quiz Quiz was developed by Nexon, who noticed the potential behind this model and released a slew of free-to-play games in the early 2000s with titles like MapleStory, Mabinogi, and Dungeon Fighter Online, to name a few. This monetization model began to spread outside of Korea, mostly in free-to-play MMOs with large amounts of customization options. One thing that I feel the need to mention though is that in September 2005, $3,596,674 of transactions were processed on Second Life. Notably, I think most of this did go back and forth between users of Second Life instead of just going to the studio, but that's still a crazy number for a single month in 2005. Now we finally get to the single item that takes most of the blame. On April 3rd, 2006, Bethesda released the infamous Horse Armor package for the equivalent of $2.50 on the Xbox Marketplace. Interestingly, the same Horse Armor was actually $1.99 on their own website. The extra 50 cents was probably accounting for Microsoft's cut of the revenue. Fortunately, the Horse Armor didn't sell especially well, but regardless, other companies took notice. After this, microtransactions appeared everywhere. Farmville let you pay money to skip wait times. Dota 2 pioneered the Battle Pass in 2013. EA got billions of dollars a day in the late 2010s from their Ultimate Team mode, which lets you buy packs of players to make your perfect team in FIFA and Madden. The Sims made it a part of their identity to this day. According to a 2024 article by Helen Ashcroft in The Gamer, it costs $1,194.23 to buy all of the DLC for The Sims 4. That's without any sales, but it is an absurdly ludicrous number. Even if you get every DLC for up to, let's say, 80% off and be generous, you'd be handing over $238.85. This is why EA has the reputation that it does. That all brings us to the state we're in right now, where live service games are king. These started with MMOs like World of Warcraft and RuneScape before moving to mobile games and MOBAs. Out of these categories, League of Legends is the most well-known for using microtransactions to fund their game. But it was Fortnite that made the free-to-play live service game model into the juggernaut that it currently is. I don't need to go into detail on the history of Fortnite. You all know what an absolute phenomenon it was in the late 2010s. Suddenly, every game needed a battle royale mode to capitalize on its success. Not only that, but the practice of battle passes exploded alongside the desire to create a game that would truly last forever. Overwatch is probably the most infamous example of this. If you don't know the story, I'll sum it up real quick. Overwatch was a team-based hero shooter that released in 2016 and was a resounding success. It managed to win Game of the Year and grew its own esports industry, which was that's a whole nother story I'm not going to get into. But either disregarding that success or because of that success, it's hard to say, the devs over at Blizzard decided it was time to make a sequel, Overwatch 2. Overwatch 2 came with some pretty significant changes. The game became free to play, loot boxes were removed in favor of an in-game shop and a new battle pass system, and heroes now needed to be purchased like in a MOBA. The heroes quickly became free again, and loot boxes returned years later, but the fact that they were comfortable enough to make all of these drastic changes speaks volumes on the state of the industry at the time. And things are only getting further and further out of hand with League's over $400 Hall of Legends skin bundles, and don't even get me started on gacha games. But how on earth is this practice profitable? If everyone agrees that these practices are predatory and unreasonable, then who's buying them? That finally brings us to the title of this video. If you've been a part of the gaming community for a while, you probably already know what a whale is. But in case you don't know, a whale is a player who spends a significant amount of money on in-game purchases. And I'm not talking about hundreds of dollars. I'm talking about the players who spend over $1,000 a month on a video game and are a significant part of the reason that game is still in business. And honestly, $1,000 a month is probably the lower end of the whale scale. The true whales are like the guy who spent over $2 million on the mobile game Modern War and later led a boycott of the very same game. That is insane. The term whale actually originates from gambling culture, where it refers to anyone who wagers large sums of money. It's often paired with terms like fish for weaker players and sharks for stronger ones. Casinos often try to reel in the biggest fish they can, which is a whale. And sure, whales are mammals, but no one ever said that casino owners passed their basic biology classes. In order to make these big catches, they tried to cozy up to casino patrons by offering rewards to these whales and encouraging loyalty. The game companies took note. Every game company nowadays has tried to catch their own whales. I know I said I wouldn't talk about gacha games, but it's such a perfect example in this case. MiHoYo has created an entire universe around the genre. And if you're not aware of what gacha games are, let me, someone who admittedly despises it, explain it to you. It's a game that centers around receiving randomized in-game items or characters. If you know what loot boxes are, they're kinda like that, except the rewards aren't just cosmetic. They directly affect gameplay and are in fact necessary to properly play the game. If there is any character or item that you want, you can't buy them directly. Instead, you have to hope that by some random chance, you just luck into getting what you want. There's usually a way to get the loot boxes for free, but it's incredibly difficult to make any meaningful progress without forking over some cash for some extra pulls. I absolutely hate how egregiously greedy this whole system is. It's exploitative and is frankly no better than all of the tricks casinos pull to keep players inside and spending money for as long as possible. I'm not going to hammer this point home too hard because I know a lot of people love the genre, but I really just don't like it. Not only are new games being made with the intention of collecting microtransactions, but good game concepts are being thrown away to force their integration. We've already talked about the Overwatch 2 example, but I have another one that may be even more extreme. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a sick and twisted version of what could have been. Originally, Rocksteady intended on making a game about the Suicide Squad because of the narrative intrigue that any main character could die at any moment. It was going to have melee-focused combat like the rest of the games in the Arkham series until priorities shifted with the higher-ups. All of a sudden, developers were told to include microtransactions and combat was changed to focus around gunplay. The writing itself even suffered. While the dialogue was the lone bright spot, the plot itself is nothing special. What's perhaps the craziest thing is that no one on the Suicide Squad itself even dies. That was the entire reason they were interested in this group of characters in the first place. But no, instead, they needed to have a battle pass and an in-game shop and a seasonal release schedule to keep players around for as long as possible. They really wanted to make that game that people would be playing for years and talk about in the same conversations as Fortnite and League of Legends. But instead, the game failed and was forced to wrap up its storyline the moment they finished their initial content release plan. I could talk about this game all day long. If you want me to do some actual research on it and release a video about this game in particular, let me know. But until then, I think it's time we move on. Because believe it or not, whales actually do bring some positives. As much as we hate the constant microtransactions being shoved down our throats, we do have to acknowledge some benefits. For instance, a lot more games have been free to play since microtransactions have become common. Remember, we don't actually have to pay for anything they're advertising. Sure, it sucks to play against people who have the most expensive skins, but they're also part of the reason these games are still in operation. This new practice has also allowed for games you love to be supported beyond their original release dates with constant updates and added content without you needing to pay for anything. When GoldenEye was released, the character Oddjob was shorter than everyone else. Because of the clunky controls of that old game, it meant that you'd have to stop moving to properly aim the crosshairs down to hit him. This, obviously, leaves you vulnerable to getting shot by them. It was so bad that people often considered picking him in the lobby to be cheating. But because this game was released in the 90s, there was no balance patch to fix it. The game on release was the only game players would ever get. But now, because of the live service model that's been popularized by free-to-play games, games like Marvel Rivals receive constant updates to make sure everything in the game is as fair and balanced as possible. Sure, they don't always do a great job, but they're trying. And what I think is probably the most overlooked benefit is that I believe the whales have helped to keep games at the $60 price tag far longer than they should have been. I'm sure for a lot of us that games have been $60 for as long as we can remember. Nintendo making the price of Mario Kart World $79.99 has caused a lot of controversy on the internet. How about we look a few years back? Released in 2007, the original Assassin's Creed was $60. Meanwhile, the latest game in the franchise, Assassin's Creed Shadow, is $70 for the base game. I think we can all agree that Assassin's Creed Shadow is a much more polished game than the original. So that $10 difference is already not that bad. Now you could argue that since technology is getting better and the quality of other games on the market is also increasing, that it should instead be compared to other games at the time. Fair enough, but how about this instead? What if we compare the spending power of that $60 in 2007 with the spending power of $70 in 2025? That $60 in November of 2007, adjusted for inflation, is equivalent to $91.29 in March of 2025, when Assassin's Creed Shadow was released. That means Assassin's Creed Shadow is actually $21.29 cheaper than the original Assassin's Creed. And look at this Toys R Us ad from 1996. Doom 64 went for $75. Doom: The Dark Ages was just released on Steam for $70. That means that without adjusting for inflation, that's already cheaper. How on earth are game companies able to cover that cost? Well, that's because these major game companies have been able to make enough money through microtransactions to make up a majority of these costs. The vast majority of that money comes from whales. Ultimately, I don't think you can solely put whales in either the good or bad category. They've definitely affected the gaming industry in some negative ways, but that doesn't mean you can entirely disregard the positives they present as well. But those are just my thoughts. I'm curious as to what you think about whales. Are they a stain on the gaming community? Or are you more than happy to pass off the costs to someone else? And let me know if there are any other topics you want me to cover. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and check out some of my other videos. There may be something else that interests you, and if there are, hitting that subscribe button would mean a lot. I want to commit more time to making content for this channel, but it's hard to justify at the moment, so every little bit helps. Thank you for watching to the end, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. See y'all next time. Bye.